your kid is addicted to social media, well then fix it. Be a parent and fix it. But they don't want to do that because they don't have enough money and they're lazy and they would rather just sue a corporation and get a bunch of money. Chat, it looks like social media all over the board is in trouble. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this because this is a very, very important thing. Meta, I think, just lost a lawsuit. Isaac, thank you very much for the like. It looks like Meta just lost a lawsuit and it could mean way more than just Facebook. Right? Let's take a look at this, chat.
Welcome back. We are following breaking news. A verdict in the landmark case addressing the power and influence of social media. The Los Angeles jury today finding Meta and YouTube negligent in the design or operation of their platforms.
What the heck is negligent? It's like, hey guys, you're not guilty, but you need to clean it up a little bit. I saw a dirty stain somewhere on the side of the office. That's kind of negligence. That's trifling. If you that's a word that black people use. Anyway, moving on.
Failed to warn users of the dangers of their services. The jurors found that.
See, that right there, failed to warn users of the dangers of their services. Chat, if you don't understand the dangers of being online, maybe you should not be online. I don't have another way of explaining that. Online is as dangerous as walking outside. Probably not as much, but you get hit by a car. I mean, you can get hit by a car in your own home too, but that's a crazy circumstances. You know the video I'm talking about, or not even a video, the photo of a car just being on the second story. I'm like, how did that even happen? But I get that they're trying to protect a lot of the people who aren't really tech savvy, which is probably old people or young people who were restricted, had a restriction to, the internet. But I don't think, maybe that's what negligence is that, hey, Facebook, Meta, YouTube, whatever, right? You're showing negligence, but we're not going to force you to pay a bunch of money. Just, hey, it's a warning. You got a warning. You got to slap on the bottom. Yeah. It's like the slap on the wrist, but different. Yeah. Anyway, chat, moving on.
The tech giant's platforms harmed a young user with features that made her addicted and led to mental health problems. The trial, which included testimony from Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, was the first lawsuit of its kind to go to trial. In separate statements, Meta and Google, YouTube's parent company, saying they disagree with today's verdict and plan to appeal. Today's verdict comes just one.
I disagree with it. I get it that you can be addicted to things on some level, but at some point there's got to be accountability for either yourself or your kid or your wife or husband if you're possessive. Do you put your wife or husband in timeout, chat, because they don't do the thing that they need to be doing? Yeah, that's a weird situation you got going on. But I'm not here to judge you, Chad. I'm just here to talk about this news thing.
Day after a jury in New Mexico ordered Meta to pay $375 million after determining that Meta concealed what it knew about child sexual exploitation on its platform. Meta
oh my gosh.
That as well. Joining me now is Jacob Ward, veteran technology journalist and host of the Rip Current podcast. He's also the author of The Loop, How Technology is Creating a World Without Choice and How to Fight Back. Jacob, thanks so much for joining me. So let's talk about today's big verdict. What was your big takeaway?
Well, Kristen, this is really, for me, it is I get goosebumps as I say it. It is truly a historic moment. I really think that this is on a par with figuring out that cigarettes cause cancer or that we needed to have seatbelts in cars. This is a huge societal shift.
I actually said something about this, I think in maybe the first video I recorded today. It was about how on one hand, they are right. Technology is dangerous. On the other hand, I really don't want to hear that from old people. It's like they're saying the right thing, but at the same time, how much of a grasp on technology does that particular old person have? Because a lot of these people are very biased. So back in my day, we drank from a garden hose or out of a pond. I'm like, you're old. You are old. We drink things out of a filter now. Things are different. But back in my day, we, went outside, rode horses. I'm like, yeah, and how did that cure cancer? Or how did that fix your phone? So, well, if you want to learn something, you just go out in nature and hug a tree or pray to Jesus. Oh my gosh, you're old. Nothing against old people. Old people are very great, just like anybody else. They got their perks and cons, right? But like I said before, you have a generation of people who are punching another generation. And when that generation finally gets into power, they may start punching them. You know what I'm saying, chat? It's a very dangerous situation. So I think they should really tread carefully on that, because I thought TikTok was going to be the last straw. It's going to be something
being unfolding in front of us really in real time. And as a result, I think this is the end of social media as we know it, and it is definitely the end of childhood as we have come to accept it. We are seeing for the very first time a social media company found liable, in this case, two of them found liable for the design choices they made and for, as a result, addicting kids in a harmful way to their product. This is something.
It's not the social media is not there to parent your child or children, right? It's the fault of the parent, if anything. But like I said before, they don't want to take accountability. Asmongold has probably said it better than I do, chat. I'm more focused on anime related stuff, AI related stuff. Those are my two biggest, mindset. But anyone in that right mind that says, hey, this kid is addicted to technology or addicted to social media, should we blame the parents? Nah. We'll find out where the parents work and break their kneecaps. I said that completely wrong. No, we'll find out where the social media people work and then we'll break their kneecaps. That's pretty much how the world wants to do that. They don't want to blame the parents. They just want to blame everybody else or just social media in general. It's like if I would, maybe this is a bad example, but if everybody went outside and started riding horses and what have you, and people was falling off these horses and getting hurt more than usual because everybody's riding horses, are they gonna blame the people who put these children on the horses, like the parents? No, they're going to blame the provider of said horse. Say, hey, you need to restrict who can buy your horses. Like, why? Because kids are falling off of them, but kids aren't the one buying the horses. Yeah, well, you're still causing a problem. They want to go after these social media giants because that's where the money is, chat. Why sue the parent and possibly put the child like in a rougher state of like living because the parents can't pay off the debt? Why do that when you can just sue the corporate giant? And what makes it so much more of appealing to sue the corporate giants is, one, a lot of people just hate wealthy people. Two, old people are glorifying their past. They said, back in my day, we just licked the ground and ate sunflowers and went crawfishing.
That was unimaginable even a few years ago because these companies have enjoyed such powerful legal protections until now. Now this new legal theory opens up an entirely new can of worms, one that consists of more than 1,600 cases that are now going to come down on one or more of these companies, Kristen.
Wow. Well, it's really striking to hear you describe.
Do you think back in the day, or even maybe today, CNN, not even CNN, some Cartoon Network or whatever channel is like, hey, you guys are having addictive practices? Like, why? Like, yeah, because kids should be outside, not sitting in front of a TV. You make kids want to watch your cartoons, like, or something like that. I've never heard of that, chat. It's always social media this, social media that. I think Asmongold said something about how social media was going to change, or internet in general was going to change in the future. All and under the guise of the cover of the delusion of we have to protect the kids. They're like, no, the parents need to protect their kids. If you really want to protect the kids, solve the problem of child hunger, right? There shouldn't be a single child in the United States, the best country in the world, who is starving or living on the street. And yet they're not tackling that problem, chat. It was like, hey, should we, solve this child hunger in the United States or child homelessness in the United States? No, let's do something else. That seems like it'd be more easier to get us more votes. We can't attack the families because they don't really have too much money unless they're like really well off. But let's go for the corporations. Yeah, like, okay, but what the corporations have to do with kids? Like, well, let's see if we can find some families that has any problems with social media and big corporations. Let's just find something like so we can try to push some type of narrative, some old people narrative, like, because we hate technology anyway. And I don't know, chat, it's very like, people say they care, but they're not doing the exact thing. Normally because I'm not a politician, I would never really try to get involved, but I'm seeing a hypocrisy. Is it hypocrisy? I'm seeing some contradiction here. They care about kids, but they're doing the low-hanging fruit thing instead of the bigger problem. Whatever, chat, let's get back to it.
Private in that context, Jacob. So paint a picture for me. You say this is the end of social media as we know it. What does that look like in our society?
Well, until now, right, we've treated our attention and by extension our behavior as, first of all, something that you and I are supposed to be entirely in control of ourselves, right? We've been sort of the opinion that somehow the choices you and I make are totally our own and can't really be shaped by anybody. But then, of course, what we saw was the rise of an industry that has made its business analyzing and shaping behavior at scale wherever possible. And this is not to say that they had nefarious ideas in mind. They just had discovered that our attention is an incredibly profitable product to traffic in. And so
they didn't discover that. It's always been known. TV channels has been known that for like so many generations, but they're punching at social media instead. Nobody watches TV. Do you think, chat, that the TV people are trying to get rid of social media so there's a less of a connection between people? Because right now you could post something online and a bunch of people will see it and, you know, spread like wildfire. That information will spread. But you have people who want control that says, hey, we need to stop that. But the best way for us to do that is to label it as a disease of some kind, label it as a problem. And if we can do that, we can get rid of social media and they can go back to the good old days of TV. Whoever's owning or in control with all the news channels, they do not like social media. There's too many people there's too many corporations on the ball game, corporations of information on the ball field. Because I could have sworn I saw a map somewhere of like all the news channels that are owned by of just a small few. A bunch of different news channels, but they're owned by a small few, and they can control whatever narrative they want, right? And I think there may be a push inadvertently or advertently, or whatever those words mean. I'm sure they mean something. They're using this to their advantage, chat. So be careful.
In this case, we're just looking at now a jury that, even a few years ago might not have been able to wrap their minds around the idea that we can have this kind of harm by the design of a platform. That was such an abstract concept. As someone who tries to articulate that concept as often as I do, I've spent years trying to get people to understand even the idea that there are armies of experts inside these companies working on that kind of idea. And now suddenly you have a jury of our peers suddenly understanding that, it seems, and as a result finding these two companies liable. So this could absolutely rewrite the rules. Now,
what could end up happening is that one of two things could happen. One, they could get rid of all social media, right? That's a possibility. Or maybe three, they get rid of all social media. One or two, they control all social media, meaning your anonymity and see an enemy. Yeah, your see an enemy, your anonymously stuff, right? There's a word for that, but help me out, chat. Your ID will be scanned and they know exactly who you are. You are using your main name. I think they do that in China, right? That's a possibility. They allow people to use social media, but there's no way for you to hide yourself anymore. You have to give out your name, your location, so they know where you are. They know who you are. They know how to find you, right? Or three, I had a third one. I can't remember. They get rid of all social media, but then we have a situation is like, how much of a problem would they have? Like, for example, they got rid of all social media. The next best thing for spreading information is to get into massive groups, right? It's not like churches, but you get into massive groups, you come together, yada this, yada that, right? But there's no place that you can really get together like safely and have such a mass, I don't know, chat. It's like a mass conversation with everybody. Like trying to replace social media with real life would be extremely difficult unless you start a religion of some kind. They do that. And, for the most part, they're kind of all on the same page. But with trying to replace social media, do what you do with social media with a massive cookout or something like that is very difficult. You can't really share ideas. You can't really inform people going on. Because if you go have a protest, if you have a protest, there's not really too many places. Like, for example, one view on Facebook, maybe 15,000 views. And everybody, for the most part, agrees with that, how crazy it is. But there's no location to do that in real life. Get 50 million or 50,000 people into one location and talk about some bad thing that happened. They're trying to control the flow of information, chat.
Will that be a rewriting of the rules that everyone will be happy with? I don't think so, right? We have enormous First Amendment issues that are going to come up with this. And you know that Meta and YouTube are going to fight tooth and nail because this is an existential threat to the way they do business. So this is not over by any stretch, but I think that the era of treating our behavior as an infinite product to mine, that era is over, I think.
It's just really powerful to hear you talk about it in those terms. You talk about the profits. Let's talk about the profits of these companies. Meta is worth more than $1 trillion. YouTube is worth more than $500 billion. Its parent company, Alphabet Inc., is worth more than $3 trillion. Could these companies just absorb the cost and keep doing business, find a way to keep doing business as usual?
I mean, when we look, Kristen, at the individual judgments here, right, you're looking at a $375 million judgment in New Mexico, and that's a slightly different issue. It is a different issue than the one that was settled in LA, but both of them sort of surround the idea that there is harm being done and a responsibility on the part of the companies. In both of those cases, right, you're looking at numbers that really are a rounding error in the balance sheets of these companies, of course, right? The $3 million judgment for this one plaintiff in LA, no way. But you look at the 350 other family cases coming down the pipeline. You look at the those alone, if you use this math, 3 million per plaintiff, that ends up being in the billions, right? Or at least over $1 billion. If you look at the math of the school districts, 250 of which are lined up to file suit, and you think about thousands of students per school district, you're suddenly getting to some very large numbers. And so whether these companies can afford this in a dollars and cents way, I think we'll figure that out. Time will tell.
Isaac says, this type of libel cases span into a larger picture that's not just entertainment. This is about profit, controlling a narrative. I was kind of thinking something like that, at least for the profit and control. Well, both really, because when she started talking about the money, and I'm like, there it is, money. All about the money, or some about it.
They did not face before now is to change the way they do business because there is suddenly liability. In the United States, Kristen, we don't make a lot of changes to how companies do business, or companies don't make a change unless there's financial harm. This was an industry so enormous that we couldn't have imagined doing enough financial harm to make it possible for them to even consider changing. Now those incentives are shifting in a way that we haven't seen, I would say, since the era of big tobacco, since the era of lead paint, right? These are enormous kinds of judgments that have to come through for a company to consider changing how they do business. And so I just think that we're probably, even though we're going to see endless appeal, this is not by any means settled in court. I think that it is for the first time operating at a scale that really touches these companies in a very new way.
I don't want to talk about touching anyone, chat, but he's right on some level where the corporations are doing things that can end up doing things that are very nasty, right? But at the same time, I don't want to hear that from someone who's old, right? I don't want to hear someone like, well, back in my day, I just read a book. Why everybody's on their phones? I don't want to hear that from an old guy, right? I would rather hear that from a close friend. That, hey, you should be sitting up straight. It's bad for your back. Or if you hunch down too much and looking at your phone, it's kind of weird. It's stuff like that. Like, hey, you're gonna have, then we could joke about it, and then it's already in my self-conscious. But the moment I hear it from an old guy or old woman, I immediately go on the defensive, like, I don't want to hear that from you. You're old. I would never say that, like, for real. But I was like, I immediately go on the defensive, like, I don't want to hear that from you, of all people. Yeah, peers. Like pairs or your generation. Exactly. You said peers wrong, but I spell checked that for you. You meant to say pairs. But I don't want to hear that from like the last generation who was probably still smoking, or a lot of them are dying from cancer because they did things wrong. It says, oh, we did things wrong, but we're different now. But this is how you should live. I'm like, yeah, you're right, but at the same time, shut up. Like, shut up. You don't even know how to fix your own computer, probably. Like, so it's like, I don't know, chat. If you don't pay attention to the corporations who are doing the nasty stuff, it can get very nasty, right? So the older generation, sure, they are seeing this, right? It says they can be manipulative in some way. There needs to be checks and balances. However, they're pointing at the wrong people. Mostly, they're pointing at the wrong people. Corporations like, hey, guys, you gotta really, be careful with how you do business. People, it's crazy out there. And then you look at the families, like, you guys are the real problems. You're bringing up an issue that says, oh, your kid is addicted to social media? Well, then fix it. Be a parent and fix it. But they don't want to do that because they don't have enough money and they're lazy. And they would rather just sue a corporation and get a bunch of money. What are you going to do, chat?
Look, before I let you go, I do have to shift gears. I want to show you this sort of extraordinary scene at the White House today. An AI-powered robot escorted First Lady Melania Trump into a summit on technology and education and opened the summit, Jacob, by actually speaking. It's kind of out of a movie. What were your thoughts when you saw this? What do we take from this moment? What are the implications?
I cannot believe that I'm speaking to you on the same day that a jury of 12 people, decided we needed to protect kids in this whole new way, established this entirely new idea of harm, and at the same time, you've got this imagery going on. I mean, we have the reason we're seeing these court cases move forward is because at the federal level, no one's been willing to make the kinds of laws that democracy has clearly been clamoring for. When I spoke to the Attorney General in the New Mexico case, he said, I don't want to have to do this court case by court case, but because we're not getting federal action, we have to. And when you see, I honestly don't know, Kristen, but I assume that's Elon Musk's robot, right? When you see the pro-tech cabal that is in the White House now, and the ways in which they are trying to just open the floodgates for that industry, and you compare that to how the first, this jury of our peers has enacted the first real sort of democratic input into what everyday Americans want to see from these sorts of companies. The contrast between these two things could not be starker, Kristen.
All right, Jacob Ward, thank you so much for your insights today. We really appreciate it. Good to see you as always.
Chat. People want to go fast, right? And people will go fast. At the same time, people also need to be safe and drive safely. Do we just force everyone to slow down or force everyone to get better? But hey, you got to go 10 miles an hour until you learn that you can go 11 miles an hour, right? I'm not talking about actual driving, but I'm using driving as an example. Oh, you can go 12 miles an hour without crashing? Let's go 12 miles an hour. For you, not for that one. That person over there, Steve. Steve can't drive 12 miles an hour. He has to stay at 10 because he's just not capable, right? You want to be on the internet all day? Sure. You seem like a good individual. Oh, you got in trouble, got banned? Well, those are checks and balances. If you want to be on the internet, don't get banned and saying some outlandish, crazy stuff, right? There are checks and balances to keep things safe. Add more checks and balances if you need to. But for children, right? I think in Australia, they banned social media for people who aren't old enough, right? But I'm conflicted with that. On one hand, you really, really got to be safe to be when you're on the internet, as safe as you are. It's like what I see is the equivalent of, hey, you can't go outside unless you're in a certain age. That's what I see, because I see a future where people will be in the digital space. Sword Art Online, right? In the future, chat, mark my words. In the future, the line between reality and fiction will be blurred. Every bit of fiction that can be imagined will happen. It's going to happen either on Earth, Mars, or Kepler Uranium 69. The line of reality and fiction will be blurred, and people are going to be living in the digital space. It's going to get even so scary to the point where people won't know what's reality, what's fiction. You will have people who will be living out prison sentences 200 years in the digital space. 200 years at Rick and Morty, 200 years because they broke a law. Now they have to live out more than just 100 years. The digital space will be another form of existence for people, and people are gonna go to work in the digital space. People are going to go on adventures in the digital space. People are going to live out their lives in the digital space. So on one hand, I do understand that you should be a certain age to be on the internet because it is a very wild place, like X, for example. I use X, but I don't like browsing X because X is insane. I also use Blue Sky, but I don't like browsing Blue Sky because Blue Sky is insane. It's not as insane as Facebook though. Facebook is kind of, it's not as gunslingery, if that makes any sense. Granted, my Facebook feed is more anime stuff. TikTok is a little bit more tamed. Instagram is just full of perverts. Instagram compared to TikTok, full of perverts. Instagram is the degeneracy off the wall. I have no idea what's going on in Instagram. When I browse anything, my favorite places are YouTube Shorts, TikTok, maybe Instagram and Facebook. It's all like all over there, but I think TikTok is really more my cup of tea. You know, I don't think I do. I don't think I have a favorite. I just end up scrolling on. I rarely use YouTube Shorts to look at anything funny. But I think when it comes to banning anything, I don't think it should be any form of governmental control on that. It should be the parent. And I'm not saying anything special. Everyone else will say that. Isaac says, I feel like the real issue kids face now in days is how controlling the previous generations were. That's very true. I can see that, but at the same time, I've been seeing memes where the grandma or grandpa gets on the grandma and grandpa gets on the parents gets angry at their parents at the parents because they're not treating their grandson or granddaughter right, that you're being too strict. They're like, you know what I mean, chat, you know what I mean. But yeah, controlling, yes. And who knows what the future holds for all this nonsense, chat. But it really comes down to taking one day at a time and doing your best to fight against this boomer mindset. Boomer mindset is not to be disregarded, chat. They got some wisdom that I would like to drink up, like a nice soda that I have every now and again. Soda's bad for your teeth, chat. And that's not a jab at what's his name, Asmongold. If that boy drinks soda. I thought I drank soda. No, he drinks soda. Anyway, chat, be careful out there on the internet because they getting wild. They getting really wild.